On the very edge of the sea in Kent stands a ruined Saxon church. Two broken towers open to the weather, with the waves working at the cliff below them. The people who live near Reculver will tell you that on stormy nights, with the wind coming hard off the water, you can hear a sound in it that is not in the wind. You can hear babies crying. It is an old tale, and for a long time it was only that. The kind a coast tells about itself on a bad night. Something to frighten children with. Nobody could say where the crying came from, or why, or whose it was. And then somebody started to dig. This is an episode about the stories the south of England tells, about dragons and murderers and the dead, and about what happens when somebody goes looking, and what they find is the truth. Welcome to Unquiet Britain. In Sussex, halfway between Horsham and a place with the unhurried name of Pease Pottage, there is a stretch of St. Leonard's forest called the Lily Beds, where lilies of the valley grow wild. By tradition, they have grown there since the 6th century, since a hermit saint named Leonard fought and killed a dragon that had been terrorizing the country. He was wounded in the fight, and wherever his blood fell, the lilies sprang up. As a reward for his courage, God decreed that the adders in the forest would never sting again, and that the nightingales, which had disturbed the saint at his prayers, would never sing there. A pretty legend, 6th century, safely long ago. Except that St. Leonard does not seem to have finished the job. In 1614, not the 6th century, the 17th, 3 villagers said they had come across, in that same forest, a strange and monstrous serpent. And what makes this one different from a saint's tale is that it was written down at the time in a printed pamphlet with the witnesses named. It was just over 9 feet long, thick in the middle, thin at the ends, red scales on its belly, black on its back, and a ring of white markings round its neck. It had large feet. It could run as fast as a man, and on its flanks it carried, in the words of the pamphlet, 2 great bunches as big as a large football, which the writer thought would grow in time to wings. Wherever it went, it left a track of matter the pamphlet called glutinous, and very offensive to the smell. It could spit its venom over a great distance, and it was held responsible for the deaths of 2 people, a man and a woman, found dead on the road through the forest. The pamphlet's phrasing is careful and cold. They were poisoned, it says, and very much swelled, but not preyed upon. It killed 2 dogs the same way, and did not eat them either. For all that, it seems to have lived mainly on a diet of rabbits. Here is the part that stays with you. Rumours of hideous creatures in St. Leonard's Forest went on being reported well into the 19th century. And as for the dragon of 1614, neither history nor legend records what eventually became of it. It was seen, described, blamed for 2 deaths, set down in print with 3 men's names against it, and then it simply went out of the record and never came back. A thing the South wrote down and could not explain away. The account outlives the creature. Our next story is about something a great house could not explain away. Not a dragon, but a dog, and what he could feel lurking on the staircase. Sissinghurst in Kent is famous now for its gardens. They were made in the last century by the writer Vita Sackville West, and Lady Nicholson, who bought the ruined castle and brought it back to life. The story goes that one day she was walking towards a particular staircase with her dog when the dog stopped. It raised its hackles and it would not go on. She felt nothing herself, but she was quite certain that the animal had been frightened by something she could not see. To understand the dog, you have to go back more than 3 centuries to the man who built the place and to the reign of Queen Mary. His name was Sir John Baker, and the country remembered him for a long time afterwards by another name. They called him Bloody Baker, because under Mary he sent so many Protestants to the stake that the castle never lost the stain of it. Those people were real. Men and women were burned alive in England in the 1550s for believing the wrong things about God. That is not a ghost story. That is history. And it deserves to be named as what it was before we go anywhere near the legend. But the legend is this. 2 women, it is said, were once in the castle when they heard Sir John coming and hid themselves under the staircase. He came up the stairs, and behind him a servant was carrying the body of another woman, a woman they believed John had just murdered. As the servant climbed, one of the dead woman's hands swung out and caught in the banister rail. Sir John did not stop. He took out his knife, cut the hand off where it had caught, and walked on. And the hand fell down through the banisters into the lap of one of the living women crouched in the dark below. There is no record of those women or that night. It is legend. But there was a real Bloody Baker, and there were real fires. And 300 years later, a dog stood on a staircase in that house and refused to take another step. A great house that could not shake off what was done in. The story first, and then the animal that seemed to feel it. Which brings us back to the church on the edge of the sea, to the sound in the wind, and to the men with spades who went looking for where it came from. Reculver, the Saxon church with the twin towers right on the lip of the Kent coast. But before we reach the crying, there is a gentler story attached to those 2 towers, and it is worth telling, because it makes what comes after more difficult. The spires, by tradition, were added in the 16th century at the request of the abbess of a nearby nunnery, a woman named Frances St. Clair, as a memorial to her twin sister Isabel. The 2 of them had been on a pilgrimage by sea when their ship was wrecked off Reculver. Isabel died of her injuries. Frances raised the towers as a landmark so that no other ship would be lost on that shore. And when she herself died years later, she was buried beside her sister beneath them. Twin sisters, twin towers, a grief turned into something useful, standing against the sky. And then there is the other Reculver story, the one in the wind. On stormy nights, the legend says, you can hear the babies crying on the air at Reculver. For generations, that was all it was, a folk tale with no substance to it. The kind of thing the sea puts into a coast's imagination. Yet archaeologists were excavating the old Roman fort that the church was built inside, and in the ground they found the skeletons of a number of babies. The reading of the infant remains at Roman sites is far less certain than it sounds, and careful archaeology is wary of turning a row of small graves into a story of slaughter. What is true is harder and quieter, that there were real children in that ground, and that they died and that nobody now can tell you their names or how. But notice the shape of it. The folk tale came first. It said, "Listen, there are children crying here." And then centuries later, somebody dug and found them. That is the thing about this coast. It tells you its stories long before it shows you the bones. 3 stories and 1 uneasy pattern. A dragon that 3 men swore to in 1614, set down in print and never explained. A murderer's house that a dog would not walk through 300 years after the fires went out. And a sound in the wind that turned out to be lying directly over the graves of children. The south of England is a great teller of tales. We begin by warning you that the stories come first, and the evidence comes after, and so it has. But notice what the evidence does when it arrives. It does not tidy the story up. It does not explain it away. The pamphlet outlived the dragon. The dog felt something the woman beside it could not. The spades at Reculver did not silence the crying. They gave it a reason. What happened all those years ago? Are the whispers and folk tales true? And what else is the wind along this coast trying to tell us? Perhaps it is time we listen. This is Unquiet Britain.